back to another episode of Backbench Drivers. Today I'm joined with Robbie Katter, the son of federal MP Bob Katter, leader of the Katter Australia Party in the Queensland Parliament. He's been a member since 2012, and he's been catapulted into the centre of media attention and discussion for the last 2 months or so before the Queensland election. And he has joined us today to talk around that. How are you, Robbie?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Matthew. Thanks for having us on.
No worries. So firstly, for those at home who are listening who don't know much about you or the causes you champion, can you just give
Yeah.
them a bit of an overview?
Oh, mate. Yeah, I grew up in a western town, Carter's Towers. I was 20 years there, and I've been in Mount Isa 20 years. A few things in between, and I was a property valuer for most of my working career. And I live out in Western areas, and there's a lot of adversity out there. So you're constantly battling population decline and decline of services in just about every aspect. And sort of can often feel like things are falling apart at the seams. So you've got to develop a bit of a fighting mentality to keep things alive, or even keep things from going backwards in those places. And I sort of come from really 4 generations of politics, but in state and federal politics for 3 generations of politics. I had a bit of a name there, and we started a party up, and I entered politics in 2012 after being on the council for 4 years. And so I guess a total of 16 years altogether in local and state politics I've been in. And I guess I have my own value set, and I very deliberately helped start a party, the KAP, Katter's Australian Party, because we felt there needed to be a party that assigned a set of values and embedded that in their constitution, so it wouldn't flip and flop around on issues as they saw them becoming popular, whether they're popular in the public domain or not. It didn't matter. You would just sign a set of values, and that was it, you know. And that attracted me, because I thought I'm not going to get into politics that's just going to flip flop around like the rest of them. But if it's about going in there and saying these are our values, you may not agree with them, but this is what we're going to do, then I'm interested. And that's where I've landed. I'm in KAP, been there 12 years, and from time to time, some of those values come up in public discussion, and that can offend or create some, media interest. And I'd probably say I characterise that by saying I'm ambivalent to it, really, because it's just, people can react however they want, but I'm not going to. That's the whole point, you present a set of values, and people can like them or hate them, but they get to vote for them. And that's the biggest criticism I'd make of like modern day politicians, is that they flip flop around and get to coast through their political career without presenting their values too much, or being accountable for their values. And I think that's a big gap in politics, and I want to be part of a wave. I want to be a lot bigger than just a member of parliament. I want to be a part of a movement that changes that in the course of politics, and makes people stand behind a set of values, and give people something to vote on. They don't have to agree with mine, but at least tell us what you think. And that's where that's where I think I've landed where I am now.
Well, yeah, it's quite admirable, because most of the criticism around politicians is that two-faced nature, the flip-flopping on issues. And as we'll come to discuss later, that was demonstrated really heavily with David Christodoulou, who's now the Premier of the state, flip-flopping on the issue of abortion, where previously he came out against the Labor government's policies, and now he's coming out in the election, he's trying to play both sides, saying, it's not part of our agenda, we're not going to do it, whilst trying to placate his Christian base, saying he will remove abortion, whilst also not trying to remove a conscious
no, I understand. Look, and not to be too harsh on Dave, because everyone does it, and he's a function of the modern political system. Like, it's too rigid, and it's far too well defined. Like, you can't just have two parties representing everyone's interests. So it's going to be so broad that you'd say, well, what the hell does it represent? Because you try to represent everyone at once. Like, that doesn't work. and we're
Yeah.
in a minority here in Australia. Like, there's, usually it takes a larger composition of parties to form a parliament and create competition, which ironically is the bedrock economic policy of Liberal and Labor's neoliberalism, which is, market based economics. But they don't seem to want to apply that to the political sphere. They want competition in there. They think it should just be two dominant players forever and ever, amen. And it's not delivering. It's not delivering to the people of Queen Australia. I mean, it is not. I'm not going out on a limb saying people are frustrated and saying we don't feel connected to the political system because, yeah, no kidding, because you don't have the Country Party anymore. You don't have the Liberal Party by itself in its own entity. You don't have the old Country Labor style representatives having their voice. Like, it's just it's morphed into these two, large gargantuan bloody parties that try and represent everything at once, and and now they don't even know what they represent. They just try and get in front of the polling data and win elections, and we're all sort of disenchanted with politics and so it's not worth even following anymore. So yeah, we'd like to be a counterpoint to all that. And look, funny thing is the Greens are at the other end of the political spectrum, and I'm probably the only ones active in the parliament like that. But you sort of know what you're getting with them. Well, I don't like it,
Yeah.
but at least you know what you're getting with them. And I think it breeds good outcomes, because if you think about it, like if you've got if you've only got the two parties in there, like one comes in with their agenda, which is usually pretty close to the previous party's agenda anyway, but they try and put some stuff in to differentiate themselves, and that comes out, and then the new government comes in and chucks all that out and has to pretend that they're different and chucks out a lot of what they did, and
Yeah.
you keep flip-flopping around the place. But we had a hung parliament here in Queensland back in 2014, and we got some legislation through, like an ethanol, which the LNP, when they were in opposition, used to always push ethanol, and so they could shore up the cane farming areas and say, "Oh yeah, we're all for ethanol." They never were for ethanol. They were never gonna take on the big oil companies, and they've got their relationships, and I don't know how that stuff works, but obviously they're never willing to take on the big oil and gas companies. So they never backed ethanol when they got into government. But when we got into Parliament, the KAP pushed E10 mandate, and the E4 mandate that exists in Queensland today is under the KAP's name, but we pushed it. And everyone tried to
I
claim
think,
credit
yeah,
for it, because you had competition in the Parliament, you broke it up, and you could get some good legislation through. Everyone actually agreed with it. They just never could be forced to a point where they had to put it through, because it's this unicameral parliament with no Senate, where you just get in, get dominant, push your agenda, and you're not answerable to anyone. And I think the ethanol is a really good example. You need competition in the parliament to get good stuff going.
exactly right. You highlight the point that the Liberal National Party of
Mm.
Queensland, they talk a big game in opposition, and once they're in power, they kind of become beholden to the interests of gas and oil companies and
Yep.
coal mining companies.
Yep.
And you represent a lot of people, especially around Mount Isa, who are connected to the coal company. Is that a
Yep.
big challenge you guys have to face around Mount Isa? Is the coal
Oh,
companies pumping money into the Liberal National Party up there?
well, that's a pertinent question to ask right now, because we've got the Glencore have just said,
Mm.
in effect, Glencore just said, look, we can't be asked running this mine anymore. It's getting a bit tricky. And more to the point, we've got 6 other big mines around the world that are bigger than this one, and have a lower wage base and a lot easier to run. So we're just going to, rather than invest any more money in this one, we'd rather invest in available capital in those mines that make us a lot more money. And that's not good if you live in
Yeah.
Australia, because they're just going to shut down 1,200 copper producing jobs at a time when the country is saying we need more copper production. The biggest copper mine in Australia has been shut down because the company's saying, well, we can deploy that capital. We can exploit wages over in Africa and South America. Why would we, make any commitment to Australia? At which point you should say, because we gave you the privilege of using that mining lease, and if you're not going to use it, we'll kick you off. We'll beat you out, and we'll get someone else in that will mine it. I've literally got 3 or 4 other big miners right now ready to keep mining the Mount Isa mine ore body. It's been going for 100 years. And I can't get I'm finding it difficult to get the government interested in forcing them off the lease to keep mining those minerals. And I mean, how does that make sense in anyone's logic? Because they're scared, presumably they're worried what the big gas company, the coal mining company is going to think of them. Or, I don't know what they've got over them, but they always seem to fall on side of the big company where you're saying, mate, I thought you're supposed to look after Australians first,
Yeah. And as we saw in the early 2010s with the mining tax back then, and recently
Yep,
with the increases in royalties in
yep,
the Labor government in Queensland, any government that goes against these big mining companies, big oil and gas companies, they seem to lose government real quick. And that's a big problem when you've got real issues on the ground in places like Mount Isa or in central Queensland with mining communities and families, and the mining companies are controlling the people who are supposed to represent them. And so that's where a group like Katter Australia Party come into their own. You guys don't really take these big money or dark money donations, and you represent the people, and that has led to your success over the last uh, couple of decades. But we've also seen in recent years this growing uh, want for North Queensland representations with party North Queensland First, which ran at the last state election.
yep.
What differs your party from them, and why do you succeed and where they fail?
Well, it's probably better to start because look at One Nation. One Nation only ever go for Senate seats. Well, I shouldn't say that. They stand in elections for lower house seats, but they never win Senate seats because you can go on in the Senate. You can go on single issues and win a Senate seat. So you can be the anti-immigration party, or you can be the pro coal and gas party or something. If you find a controversial issue, you can get your 10%. Well, it's 14% roughly you need for a Senate spot. You can get that by just going single issue. To get a lower house seat, you need 30 to 40%. You've got to have a lot more in your bag of tricks than just saying I'm anti-immigration or something. You've got to say, what am I going to do about water supply and development in the area? What am I doing for tourism, agriculture, beef industry, all those sort of things. So you've got to be a lot broader in how you approach things. And if you're a North Queensland First Party, they'd say, well, yeah, okay, that's great, but what are you doing about youth crime? What are you doing about this? And so we've had the benefit of, I'll be honest, like the Cat and Home, to sort of get some seats initially, and then try and build a party around that and use that as the. My father's celebrating 50 years in politics. That gives you a platform to sort of win seats and get in there to push things like the North Queensland state. And that's why, I guess that's as good as I can explain why we're more successful. And, I mean, we can talk more about the separate state, but I like to say I'd be just as in favour of that almost it's just as important to me if I lived in Sydney and Melbourne than if I lived in uh, Mount Isa or in North Queensland, is that we have a separate state because we've got to grow as a country. And the United States has created 19 new states in the same time Australia's created zero. They've developed, they have cultural differences, they've had more resources, and your governing centres are too far from the areas you're trying to develop. So they matured, grew, and said, well, we can do this better. Let's do it better. They were mature enough to do that and take advantage of federalism. We haven't. We're still stuck in the dark ages where it's like, no, let's just keep doing the same thing we've done forever and never challenge these boundaries. And most people will say, yeah, you probably should have a separate state, just not now. And it's like, well, when? In 1,000 years? 500 years? Like, it's just silly not to contemplate it. And, Tasmania, I think Tasmania is like, I don't quite know the figures, but they've got less population. They've got a fraction of our GDP in North Queensland, a smaller population, or you might say at least roughly similar population. They've got 12 senators, we've got none. And it's just it's just silly not to consider it. And so it's a big part of what we say, but it's still everyone's just saying, oh, that's just you guys trying to take more power or anything. It's like, mate, we're trying to help you because if we build a dam and an irrigation scheme, and I can stay there. So, sorry, mate. Just give
I
me a
think it's
second.
oh good.
That they can stay there, mate. Yeah, unless you want to steal it off me. Sorry about this, mate. Yeah, so they can. You can just edit these out, can't you?
Yeah, I will.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, mate. Yeah. So
Most.
we've yeah. So with a separate state, if you build an irrigation scheme and like people in there are paying an extra, say, 300 or 400 million in tax a year because you
Mm.
built a dam with money that was otherwise going to be spent on a new sports stadium or um, and you could if you spend that money better, then people in Sydney and Melbourne are going to have more tax revenue going in because the cattle property that was running 5,000 head, or let's say 1,000 head, is now producing $600,000 a year instead of $50,000 a year because you've put irrigation on it because you built a dam. You had some policies that release water out of the river, which we're literally fighting for now.
Yeah.
Then you've greatly increased the taxation base. Most of that tax doesn't go back to North Queensland. It goes down to bloody federal government who just places it for hospitals, schools, and everything. So if you live in Sydney and Melbourne, you should be saying, bloody oath, we want a separate state because we want more tax revenue to pay for our schools and sports stadiums and hospitals. But we've got all these ideologues that constrain that make policy is not fit for purpose, has nothing to do with what we're doing, and they sort of saying, no, you can't build dams, you can't do this, and we all lose, and you might say, oh, but they care about the environment, and you say, well,
Mm.
usually in my books, the people that care most about the environment live in it. And if you care so much about it, go up and live there, because you're not going to, most people aren't going to ruin the place where they live and plan to live for the next couple of generations. And that's us up there, where all these people from Brisbane and everything make the laws say, no, you can't develop any of that. I think, well, we all lose from that because the rest of the world got to develop their resources and use them. And you can still, put some environmental regulations in that. You don't have to be fully scorched earth, but we get denied any of that development opportunity because you've just got so many bloody constraints along the way.
It reminds me of especially the Hell's Gate Dam up
Oh,
near
you know about
Townsville.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that is largely a political football between governments because there isn't enough political representation for the interests of North Queensland. The
Yep.
vast majority of senators for Queensland are based in southeast Queensland, or even if they move up to Townsville, they're originally from southeast Queensland, so they kind of have that mindset, of the culture in the
Yep.
southeast,
Yep.
and they can't really represent the north. And this isn't just this kind of idea of making new states isn't uh, contained only to North Queensland. We had a guest recently talk about the Riverina in New South Wales, Victoria, doing a similar
Well.
thing.
Yeah. Yep. I've heard of this. Yeah. Right.
And then I've heard also in WA, in the outback around Kalgoorlie, some people want that to be its own state. So
Yeah. Yep.
it is becoming a larger political issue in the future.
Mm.
Now, but we were talking about the power that the Liberal Party and the Labor Party have over not
Mm.
only Queensland but Australia more broadly.
Yep.
And if they were to make a North Queensland or a Riverina state, they would lose their own control or their own power over the whole country. So how
Yep.
can we advocate for these referendums to have these decisions in a power structure where they don't want that to happen?
You need to line up the MPs that live in North Queensland and say, why won't you support this? And if you won't, and develop that, I guess, that culture on the ground where people are seeing that it's what we need and what we want and that desire for it and turning it against the local members. And you might start with one or two, but if you can put a pressure on a few local MPs in election to force that outcome, that's a pretty good lever to pull. And that doesn't sound much, but
Mm.
in the numbers are tight and, people want to govern. You could maybe force the plebiscite, which is just a
Yeah.
non-binding vote, like they did with the gay marriage. So you say, well, the result's not binding, but it's still going to put a lot of pressure on you. So that could be something to aim for. That look, I don't know, like a lot of things we push, you just got to hope that logic is going to win the day, um, and that's why I'm careful to say it's not just for the benefit of North Queensland. Like there's as much in this for people in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne as there is for the people in North Queensland.
Yeah. And especially with currently in the current parliament, the LNP has a slight majority, and there's enough members up North Queensland for people who live in North Queensland to push for this. Is there any sort of material or anything that they can leverage to help push their local representatives towards this?
No, oh, you mean individuals to put?
Yeah,
Um, well, yeah,
anyone they can listen
yeah. We often
to.
have this conversation. I mean, it really that's about you could cut and paste this with any whether it's a separate state or anything. Well, I can speak from experience. Politicians get scared of one person coming up to them and saying that, um, you know, I'm going to come after the next election. I'm going to put a sign outside your. I'm going to put a sign up on your office. I'm going to, campaign against you for the next couple of years, and I'll work against you if you don't give me this outcome. And hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, so individually, individuals can intimidate politicians, and if one person says, "I'm going to sit outside your office for the next year" with a sign saying vote for the NQ state, or this person wouldn't, that intimidates people. And if you get one MP across the
yeah.
line, start to put pressure on his leaders, then we can work on the second one. We get second one. So that's what I said at the start. It's
They'll start talking to each other
yeah,
afterwards. Yeah,
it's I think it's it all looks too big, but incrementally, if you can just start prying off um, some of the people, some of the MPs, and start putting pressure. The next thing you know, the leader of the day, the party room's got three really unhappy Northern MPs that are demanding something here. Then maybe you get the plebiscite, and then when you get the plebiscite, then you've got your power door. Then you can start to push. So that's how it goes. Look, I should air too. I think it's always healthy to air the negative arguments that come out. One of the main ones is, the last thing we need is more politicians. We've got too much government in life. Well,
yeah,
that's okay. I understand how you view the argument, but in a broader context, that's a bit naive. Just saying that, like it's a bit lineal or one dimensional. I feel like because okay, well, good then that's the alternative. The alternative is you're stuck with what you got for the rest of eternity. And
yeah.
if they're costing
It
a
could
few more
just.
politicians for unlocking all this
Yeah,
wealth and having policy that's fit for purpose, I think it's a small price to pay.
yeah, exactly right. And as you're talking about, if North Queensland was its own state, it would drive this additional taxation revenue that would otherwise not
Well,
occur if it remained part of
yeah.
Queensland. That would pay for the politicians
Well, I
itself.
get yeah,
So it's not an additional tax burden on people in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Perth.
yeah. Well, let me just give you the example of a person I know that was doing irrigation could run could make about 20 to 50 grand a year off their place just from running cattle, from grass, cattle eating their grass and growing cattle out to sell them every year. But with irrigation, and if you live on a river, they had the irrigation. You pull the water out of the river, and like with roughly 1,000 acres of irrigation, which is not big, but just pulling some water out of the river,
Yeah,
just doing a policy that gives them water out of the river, they can make 600 grand a year. Now, so
yeah,
now they're paying tax. And what if you do that for 50 farmers along some of these rivers in the north? They're massive rivers. And at the moment,
mm,
literally, the government says, no, you can't take water out. And you've got to watch all that water, these big volumes of water, much bigger than some of the
yeah,
southern rivers, their average annual flow. But we've just got to watch it all flow out to sea. And then it's a dry ass riverbed for the next 9 months of the year. and we're not allowed to take any of it out. You
No.
let 50 farmers take that out and turn their $50,000 income to 600,000. Guess what? Everyone's richer from that, from the taxes they're paying. So, and who the hell missed that little bit of water that was going out? It's a difference. There's a difference. Instead of 20 feet over the bridge, it's, it's 19 or 18 feet over the bridge. No one notices it. But we can't do that right now because you've got people in Brisbane saying, no dams and no water, it's bad for the environment, and you're killing the earth, and,
No.
so we're just stuck in neutral. If you can't make money that way, you'll just start saying, well, let's hold an Olympic Games because that'll make us money, and let's, build another sports stadium because that makes us money. And as a co, people are like, no, that doesn't make you money. Like this stuff, you've got resources up here, and you're creating something from nothing that's a saleable commodity that you're producing. That's what makes you money, and that's how we get wealthy. But I think we're the
Yeah.
only ones that
And
believe in that in the parliament.
yeah, and it's not just a Queensland issue as well. I had worked down in New South Wales early this year, and from the Department of Climate Change, Water, Energy, whatever the big acronym, the New South Wales government adamantly said you can't build any more weirs along the Murray or the
Yeah,
Murrumbidgee. And there's the same issue down there. You got a lot of farmers with water insecurity. If they just take a little bit out of the Murray or the Murrumbidgee, it could help their farms out in tough times. Increase how much croppage or livestock they could hold on their
yeah,
farm, increase give them financial sustainability, not having to rely on farm
yep,
assistance, and not having to sell up their farm to larger farms or leave the
yep.
industry.
Well, yeah,
But there seems to be a lack of political will
it is.
to for farmers, even though the National Party has been quote unquote representing farming interests for the last decade or so in Parliament, in government, and in opposition now.
Well, yeah. What's represent mean? Because if it means saying nice words about it, but if it means slamming the desk and threatening to walk out or resign if you don't get the approval through, or sacking public servants that aren't culturally um, completely detached from that same agenda, then, well,
Yeah,
you're not serious. Like, don't say you're for it because you're not. Like, unless you're going to change the outcome, because everyone will say they're for it, but no one's willing to do what it requires to allow or facilitate anything happening. And I'm a living, breathing, working example of that because I'm buried neck deep in a number of irrigation projects the last 5 or 10 years in North Queensland, and it's got nothing to do with being in government or who's in government or anything. You've just got departments that do not want to develop this stuff. So until we can get people who are serious about that agenda, we're all wasting our time, and everyone loses in
yeah,
Queensland and Australia.
exactly right. Now switching to our second main talking point, in the lead up to the Queensland state
Yeah,
election earlier, a couple of
yeah,
months ago now, you told ABC News of your intention to reintroduce a private member's bill to provide care to babies born alive during
yeah.
abortions. And this led to a massive firestorm among the media. Um, Shannon Fentiman of the Labor Party, particularly, was campaigning against this. And we saw in the lead up to election day, during the debates and out in public, David Crisafulli being heckled with this, other members of the Liberal National
Mm.
Party. And the LNP was unable to articulate their position in any meaningful
Yeah,
way. And they were flip flopping despite being, when they were in opposition, voting against liberalising abortion
yeah, yeah.
laws. So why is it that the Katter Australia Party is able to effectively promote, a position on abortion that is quite reasonable, whereas the LNP struggle to do
Well, I'm
so?
pleased you say it's quite reasonable. Like, I don't know, like Liberal and Labor both voted in the committee system last Parliament to say that it was not. They said you should not mandate that a planned abortion baby that's come out alive and is fighting for life, that you should just give it care, which might be just most of them aren't ever going to live, but just looking after them, maybe give them painkillers or trying to wrap them up and cuddle them,
Yeah.
just to make sure they don't end up in an industrial waste bin, which has happened, or in
Yeah.
a kidney
Yeah.
dish in a dark room where they cry themselves to death. So all we're saying is that you should just have to care for them, like any other baby. Now, like 90%, I'm pretty sure of Queenslanders say, yeah, that's fair enough. But they're that scared.
Yeah.
They're that scared of how this stuff is perceived, because as soon as you just use the word abortion, bang, it turns this binary argument, and they just invoke all these cliches and say women's rights and you say, what do you mean? Like, what are you talking about abortion? Give me some detail. What exactly? Because if you just, as I explained it there, the process is that if women want an abortion, mainly because they don't like the optics of giving a needle to the baby once it's born and injecting the potassium chloride in it, which
Yeah.
gives it excruciating pain. That's the same injection you give someone, a lethal injection in the United States when they're in chair. You give them the same thing, potassium chloride, injected in their heart. Except if you're on death row in the States, they give you a painkiller. They don't give these babies a painkiller. So
Mm.
they're screaming in excruciating pain, and the mother gives birth to them. And they're supposed to be dead when they come out, but a lot of them aren't, so they're still alive.
Yeah.
And they're struggling for life. And a lot of midwives, some doctors, mainly midwives, have complained saying we want to care for them because, they're dying, but we just want to look after them. And in many cases, they're told not to. And but we're just saying there
Mm.
should be a requirement to do it. And people say that's an abortion issue. It's like it's a human rights issue, but whatever. Let's call it abortion. It is what it is. And they voted against it. And I don't know. I'm just sort of ambivalent to the noise that's out there, whether people like it, hate it, or say it's going to be. I couldn't really care less. I'm going to put it back in the parliament. It's a pretty minor thing in
Yeah.
my view. It's really not. It's really not an abortion issue. It's just dipping your toes in the water on that in that area. But yeah, look, the two major parties use it as a cultural war, so that they can look like they're really progressive and left. And the sad thing is, I don't think they really care about that baby's life. I think they're just thinking about the
No,
politics of it. And
because maybe you can't vote for them, can they?
the babies can't vote for them. And um, I saw a sign the other day, a woman holding a sign up saying, protects women's rights. Keep them alive when they're a baby. Like, make sure they get.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, and that's my cat's cry. Is everyone says, what do you say to the women, or you try and take away women's rights? And so, well, implicit in your question is the fact that you deny there's a baby in this discussion.
Yeah.
And fair enough if that's your belief, but mine is that there is a baby, and I think they need a bit of representation. As it turns out, I'm in the minority, or the KAP's in the minority, in giving those babies representation. I can live with that, but am I gonna? Do I need to apologise for that? Or like, no, like, what the hell? I'm allowed, entitled to have a view, and I'm going to push it pretty hard. So that's where we stand with it. And I don't know. I find it a bit weird that people get upset or outraged about that.
Yeah, I mean, we here at the National Observer fully agree with that. It is quite, if there was a baby in any other scenario that's screaming out for pain, and the government told midwives, nurses, doctors that they can't help the baby, it's a 6 month-year-old, there would be
Yep.
outrage. But because it's tied to abortion,
Yep.
there's this weird kind of double standard
Yes.
that's out
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
And
It's frustrating, but it is what it is. So we've got to, probably makes me a bit more determined to push it and put it front and center, so there is a debate. There's another interesting fact with all that is, like, some of the media commentators have said, why would you bring this up in an election campaign? It's like, well, why not? Oh, because it's a,
yeah,
but isn't that exactly the whole reason of an election campaign? So that we tell you what our values are and where we stand on things, so you can choose who to vote for
hmm
accordingly. Isn't that the whole point? Oh no, we just don't know anything
yeah,
talking about this now. So the point of election campaign is we all just don't say too much and hide everything, so we can trick you into voting for us. Is that the point? And that's literally what that was 4BC radio in Brisbane. Literally what they were saying. I couldn't believe it.
yeah, yeah. And another take on this was what I heard from Wayne Swan, who's the federal director of the Labor Party,
Yeah,
or at
yeah,
least the
yeah,
Queensland director. He said that your opinion, more broadly, or pro-life kind of opinion within Queensland is the result of a quote-unquote US infiltration, culture
Oh,
war, end
mm,
quote, which anyone that looks at US politics in the last half decades or the overturn of Roe v.
yeah,
Wade, and then that became a political issue solely for the left. They campaigned on abortion access and
yeah,
abortion rights. And then what we've seen here is Shannon Fentiman and the Labor Party campaign in the same style as the US Democrat
yeah,
Party. Yet they're blaming people like you and
yeah.
I for being influenced by the US politicians.
Yeah, like I don't know. It's such a silly and immature thing to say because
Yeah,
and like it's implied that we can't think for ourselves in saying that, like, oh, you've just come out and said that because someone else is saying it. It's like, no, have you ever figured that we actually have rationalized our way through this and thought this is our position and that we're entitled to that? Like,
yeah,
it's such a denigrating way to refer to it
yeah.
that you couldn't possibly have come up with this same conclusion yourselves. You must have like taken it from somewhere else.
Exactly. And it also ignores the fact that for the vast majority of Queensland history, we've been pro life as a state.
Yeah.
We've defended the rights of babies against abortion. And it's only under that Palaszczuk government within the last decade has this been uh, overturned or changed in a drastic
Yeah, well,
measure.
Galaxy polling said 70% of Queenslanders are against late term abortion. So it's the politicians driving this agenda, not the public
Exactly.
or the noisy minority. It's not the majority of
Yeah.
Queenslanders. And it's really a
And
good sort of barometer of where we are as a culture with our and how in sync our political class is with the masses because they're that scared of the noise that they're willing to go against what is 70% of the population's view. And maybe
Mhm.
they don't vote on,
And you
70%
talk
mightn't
about,
vote on that issue
yeah,
that way, but still, that's the Galaxy polling. If it's, give or take 10% margin for error, and you still strong support for people opposed to late term abortions in Queensland. So, yeah,
yeah.
it's a good little exercise to demonstrate how out of touch our politicians are.
And even within the LNP, you have politicians such as Amanda Stoker who have spoken publicly at pro-life rallies, who privately they talk about wanting to uh, wind back the clock here, but yet publicly on the campaign trail they go and they spin the same line as Chris Foley around how it's not in the agenda, it's not in the plan. Where, and as you said, 70% of Queenslanders oppose late-term abortions. So really, it does demonstrate the power that the media in Queensland and across Australia do have over politicians, where they're more afraid of the ire of the ABC or Channel 9 than the actual voters.
Well, a good friend of mine said to me the other day that a value is completely meaningless. Having values is completely meaningless unless you expressed them in some way or exercise them in some way. So look, I'm not going to pick on Amanda Stoker, but anyone can say, "Oh, yeah, I'm really for the cause." Well, okay, that's nice, but that's just words. Like until you actually demonstrate to me that you're willing to die for the cause. Now, let's say not die, but let's say act on that and put yourself out on a limb and um, and encounter some sort of cost for that holding that value, then it's meaningless. It is an absolute meaningless value to until you have to exercise it. And sadly, I think that is runs rife. I mean, there's a lot more leftists in the Labor Party that I find at the other end of the political spectrum for my values. But in the Liberal Party, there's a lot more people offend me because they say they're for it, but don't show any evidence of that in their voting pattern, or they don't put bills up, or there's nothing coming into Parliament to demonstrate it. So what's the point in saying it?
Thanks for joining us today, Robbie. It's a pleasure to have you on. So, just tell the audience where they can follow you to support you or learn more about what you do.
Yeah, well, mate, we're really interested in trying to start a political movement, and people like-minded that have values and want to sign themselves to a party that has values and doesn't sort of flip-flop around the place. And I think there's a lot of young people up with questioning minds that are seeing changes going on in the world, and with the US election, seeing that it doesn't all have to be one way. So yeah, we're really interested to build our movement, and that's just a matter of contacting us through. And I've got MP Robbie Katter on the Instagram, the Facebook page, and Robbie Katter MP, and or the KAP contacts the KAP websites, and very keen to have people on board, involve your listeners in conversations and in trying to facilitate change, get behind campaigns for us to change some of this stuff. We've done some good things in Parliament over the last 12 years, but I think there's a lot more we can do with broadening our support base. And I think there's a lot of willing people. We've got to marry up with them, and we'll be on our way. So, yeah, really, really encourage people to get in touch.
So, everyone at home, if you've liked what you've heard, go follow Robbie, help him out, help his party out, and have a good weekend, everyone. Thank you for coming on, Robbie.
Thanks, buddy. Really appreciate the opportunity.
No worries.
Thanks, Matt.